Hello, everyone. Welcome back um, from the afternoon, evening breaks, or if you're waking up just now, to the Development and Climate Days of 2025. I am Namrata from Global Resilience Partnership, and I'll be moderating this afternoon plenary today. This session is mostly about connecting the dots between what we've heard this morning, the insights, the tensions, the breakthroughs, and how we take those lessons forward and help shape real outcomes at COP in Belém. So I'll start very quickly with what we've heard from the 4 sessions early in the morning. There were a lot of focus on locally led adaptation and action, and the fact that it is being demonstrated through concrete and real world examples that span entire policy cycles from national design to finance to accountability, and is showing what is effective, and that is that local leadership is effective in practice. There was a focus on bridging governance levels as well. Strong adaptation outcomes depend on linking local priorities to national and regional and other global decision-making processes, and so community needs need to influence higher policy levels and financing systems. There was also a discussion around how scaling can only happen through systems change. Effective decentralization focuses or is dependent on devolved decision-making, context-specific capacity building, and strong learning systems that are connecting all the practitioners through different kinds of peer exchanges, and there is an iterative improvement through that, and that kind of scaling can help make those systems change. And now when we're talking about different organizations talking to each other to make this significant impact, collaboration across agencies is very important, and successful interagency or interagency collaborations requires balancing structures, and also some kind of flexibility, understanding each other in terms of how we work, in terms of governance, how you define roles, how you as an organization communicate with different stakeholders, and that can help, prevent confusion, also duplicating work and sharing common purpose. There were other discussions around the institutional mechanisms, which are now focused a bit more around adaptation finance. The fact that collaboration demands flexibility in the institutional culture itself. Agencies need to adapt to share data openly. They need to create feedback loops that can connect technical information with real-time decision making. And while this is going on, there's also the fact that we need to fix the adaptation finance misalignment. It is growing, but it is also trapped in a rigid top-down system. Progress also may mean redefining what we mean by quality finance and designing mechanisms that channel funds directly to local actors and communities and move away from project-based approaches. And now this specifically moving away from project approaches was heard in both sessions around finance. One mention was by implementers themselves, and the second mention was by the funding agencies themselves. So there seems to be a consensus on the fact that we need to move away from project-based financing. And finally, also, emerging tools like AI and insurance and predictive analysis can revolutionize adaptation. Aligning finance with risk information, maybe transform how we look at adaptation into a more smart investment side of things. But we also need to look at the data center energy use that is of concern, not just from the emissions point of view, but from the point of view of water resilience as well. So these were very quick points that we heard from the 4 sessions in the morning. For this session, we will start with a visual recap, also from our graphic artist, and then hear reflections from our panel of incredible speakers. We are bridging community leadership, we have national government, and folks talking about global climate processes. Later, we will have a live poll, so please stay ready to share your views as well. But let's dive in on the visual storytelling recap. Over to you, Jorge.
Okay, so gonna share my screen. It looks like that's working. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna start with an image that to me captures the spirit of what's happening today. And it's this one is Development and Climate Days. And we are moving from here, from the left side, which is ambition, to the right side, which is action. So that I think is what this Development and Climate Days is all about. And so we kicked off the day with some music, courtesy of Phoebe Coco. It was very beautiful. I don't remember the lyrics. I remember something about singing in a tree, which is quite a nice image. And we looked at what happens when we go from adversity to action. We looked at dangers. Some of the dangers are fatalism, funding cuts, declining funds, politics, you know what politics I'm talking about, right? And what can we lose? We can lose the inaction. And how do we get motivated? Some of us get motivated by hope, and some of us get motivated by fear. And where are we heading? Where do we want to go? We want to go to a more inclusive space, and we want to move towards a healthier planet. I know people say lots of other things, but this is just a few snippets. And then we moved on to real world decentralization. And some of the key messages here were, I think this was from Kenya, climate change is not going to wait for someone else to solve local problems. This is taking the shape of some kind of angelical someone else from somewhere else, solving problems for the local people. Someone from Uganda said, "We are progressively building a system to run adaptation without external support." So that is a good thing. And then we also heard that people who are feeling the effects are not part of a process. A participatory approach is needed. So that's that. Those are some of the key messages from real world decentralization. And then we had this other panel on interagency collaboration for resilience. Disclaimer, it's not easy. Empathy and patience can go a long way in helping us understand what other people are saying. We have to figure things out together. Curiosity, common goals, and understanding of red lines is a good basis. Remember, not a single person will ever have the answer. We need to align expectations. So that's that for that block on interagency collaboration. And following that, we heard about adaptation finance in uncertain times. So we know this $1.9 trillion that allocated to climate finance. Of those, only $65 billion are for adaptation, and only 0.2% of that goes to local communities. And we know that the majority of publicly available finance is in commercial loans. So that is that for adaptation finance in certain times. And then what constitutes efficient and effective adaptation finance? So we heard that community voices are not always considered and priorities are not always relevant. Ensure climate action meets local needs. And I had this idea of building a community group around a plant and then some kind of minister in a helicopter just throwing some tree saplings at the people down below. And this is not necessarily what they needed, but it's something that was aligned with the priorities of the government, not with the priorities of the local people below the helicopter. And then we also heard that decentralized adaptation finance is key, and also that we need to bring women perspectives to the decision-making process. And that for me, that is my take on what happened during the first part of the day. I hope I didn't miss anything super important. If I do, just let me know, send me a message and try to put in there. Cheers.
Great. Thank you so much, Jorge. Very powerful way to see the day come alive. And I love how your visuals remind us that while these conversations span different sectors and systems, finally it all is circle backs to people, their agency, their resilience, and their voice. For those joining us online, Jorge will be filling up the right-hand side of the graphic at the end of the day. So circle back at the end of the day to look at the remaining part. But thank you, Jorge. To open our reflections, I'd like to invite Dr. Madan Prasad Kariyar. He is the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock Development from Nepal. Dr. Perrier has a truly unique perspective, having worked for years with civil society before stepping into government leadership. His experience embodies the bridge between non-state and state actors, and his voice has been very vital in LDC perspectives, bringing LDC perspectives to global negotiations. Dr. Perrier, over to you for your reflections on the importance of non-state actors and representations in global dialogues and how your own journey is affecting your engagement now.
Thank you, Namrata, actually. Dear colleagues and participants of D&C Days, actually. First of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the organizers for inviting me to speak at this important plenary sessions titled From Dialogue to Action, Reflections and the Road Ahead of COP30. I'm honored to offer my reflections on the importance of non-state actor representation in global dialogues, drawing from my own journey of moving from community and civil society engagement of almost 2 decades into a recent government role as the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock Development of the Government of Nepal. I would also like to share how this dual response perspective of mine strengthens my efforts to bring least developed countries' voices and frontline experiences into climate negotiations. Nepal, a least developed country, a highly climate vulnerable country, faces disproportionate impacts of climate change despite contributing minimally to global greenhouse gas emissions. Rising temperatures, erratic rainfall, glacial retreat, and extreme climate events such as floods, landslides, droughts, and glacial lake outburst floods have caused severe socio-economic and environmental consequences, including loss of life, displacement, destruction of infrastructure, erosion of cultural heritage, and irreversible ecosystems. Agriculture, which contributes almost 25% to the national GDP and provides employment to more than 60% of population, has been affected the most due to climate change. The drying water resources, increasing insect pest infestations, frequent and unpredictable floods, prolonged droughts, and erosion of fertile topsoil emanating from climate change have resulted in decreased agricultural and livestock productions and productivity, severely impairing the lives and livelihoods of smallholder farmers. In this backdrop, several initiatives have been undertaken in Nepal at local and national levels to combat the impacts of climate change. Communities, civil society organizations, and government at all three levels, local level, province level, and federal level, are constantly engaged in developing, testing, and promoting various locally led adaptation technologies and practices. These are often cited as exemplary locally led adaptation accomplishments. My own experiences of working with the communities reflect that there are extensive possibilities to combat climate change threats through locally led community-based adaptation. For example, the multiple use water systems offer an excellent opportunity for water for smallholder farmers to make the most efficient use of scarce water resources, providing water for domestic purposes and irrigation of high value agriculture. The integrated pest management technologies are highly cost effective and hygienically safe to control the insect pest infestations. The local adaptation plan of action LAPA, for which Nepal prides to be the world leader, has been most effective in planning and implementing various adaptation measures at local level. These climate smart agriculture technology and practices have been developed by communities hand in hand with non-state actors together with local governments. But the coverage is extremely limited. We need to scale these technologies, expanding their use in rural remote areas of Nepal. We do also have to develop various new technologies drawing from experiences of other countries to tackle various emerging climate challenges in agriculture sector. For this purpose, the support of non-state actors is imperative. While saying this, I would also like to stress that our attempts to address loss and damage and implement climate change adaptation and mitigation plans are facing serious financial and technological gaps. The government is committed to create an enabling environment for accessing climate funds from external as well as internal sources. There is also a need to develop new policies, guidelines, and other legal instruments to ensure cost-effective and efficient implementation of climate interventions. For this purpose, the grassroots level experience of working with communities and non-state actors will definitely be an asset for the government entity. The ground reality is realized from engagement with non-state actors, based on which the government will be able to advocate and negotiate with national and international agencies for appropriate climate adaptation, mitigation, and for addressing loss and damage uh, uh, effects, measures. And I believe my own engagement with local communities, civil society, and various non-state actors will strengthen my efforts as a government member to bring least developed countries' voices and frontline experiences into global climate negotiations. With these reflections, I would like to conclude with my statement that non-state actor representation is extremely important in global dialogues to bring least developed countries' voices and frontline experiences into climate negotiations. Thank you very much for hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Madan. Also for reminding us that resilience isn't just technical, but it is deeply rooted in political and other relations and deeply rooted in representation and power. We hope that Nepal, along with other LDCs, is able to access new tech and merge world tech and bring in new finance and technical capabilities And thank you so much for your time. I know you have limited time availability, and we're very thankful that you were able to carve out some time for us. And we will be sharing some of the key messages from the entire day with you as well.
Thank you, Namrata, for your invitation. Thank you so much.
Now, let's open it up to discussion further with our panelists. Just quickly introduce them. We have Suranjana Gupta, Senior Advisor from Horo Commission. She champions grassroots women leadership across global projects. Marcia Toledo, Director for Adaptation and Resilience at Climate Champions team. Sostina Takure, a Regional Program Officer with Dan Church Aid, and also a negotiator for Zimbabwe and effective with UNFCCC. Dr. Nufara Lamfa, from the Program Director and Lead Scientist at University of Minnesota, and also a negotiator for the Gambia. Thank you, all of you, for joining. I'd love to start with very quick, broad reflections from each of you, specifically focusing on, if you've been listening in, what gave you hope and stood out from morning sessions. But if you have not been listening in, if you could comment on some of the key messages that were discussed earlier in this session, and also just generally up to the run of COP, what gives you hope and stands out for you for coming COP. We'll start with Marcia.
Thank you very much, Namrata. I hope you can hear me well. And it's a pleasure to be here with everyone and as well participate in today's discussion. Yes, I would say it is very strong from the discussions earlier today and the sense of momentum. As also the graphics were indicating, there is action, there is momentum, there is an evolution that we have to recognize. It is not anymore a wish, a plan, an opportunity far away. Adaptation is happening every day. It needs to scale even more. It needs to be mainstream. But there is a recognition of all those efforts happening. There's also a sense of response rather than waiting, is really showing that response that is happening. Also, as what the graphics were saying, adaptation is not waiting for somebody to come and resolve it. So the action, locally led, the people's perspective, the opportunities are already shaping those. But we need to, of course, tackle those enablers, those opportunities to help bring that action to a higher, let's say, opportunity to bring a higher context, scaling or mainstreaming of what already works, but also learning with a specific context. And that recognition also have put today the discussion that need to recognize how it's working, that decentralized approaches, locally led approaches. But one point that kept me thinking that is very connected to not only thinking about the quantity, but also about the quality is how we track progress. This year, I work with the Climate Champions team, which is supporting and working collaboratively with the COP30 presidency in the One Action Agenda. And what it means is very focused on implementation, very focused on showcasing, advancing those solutions, but specifically in the scaling, responding to the outcomes of the global stocktake, trying to identify those macro opportunities, but also those locally led opportunities. But at the end of the day, where it's critical, which again comes to a very, very timely moment in our time with the outcome of the global goal adaptation, is how do we track progress? How can we also tell the story, what works, how people got benefit, how nature got restored or increased its resilience, but as well how our economy, and that interpretation of seeing socioeconomic and benefits around building resilient development matches perfectly the theme of this conversation, climate and development. So very happy.
Thank you, Marcia. Glad to see, important points being made in the discussion, and also will be taken up for global policy processes later on. So Ranjana, over to you.
Thank you, Namrata. I think the sessions had a lot to reflect on. Actually, I'll just touch on a few things that struck me as I was listening. I think what is extremely encouraging is the ways in which very sort of established institutions, where I believe changing systems are hugely challenging, such as the World Bank or national governments or even local governments, have actually developed and are well sort of beyond testing, but are actually working with these new mechanisms for financing locally led adaptation and being much more responsive to the voices and the needs of people really impacted by climate change. So I feel that very encouraged by the way in which these sort of experiences are really gaining momentum. They have a lot of lessons to offer. It's not just sort of talk, but institutions that are walking the talk. So I really appreciate that. I think I would take a moment to talk about the COP, because I think that this is supposed to be a big COP on just transitions. So I feel like on the one hand, we have a whole series of initiatives, whether they're highly localized or coming from big institutions, that are showing us the direction that we should be transitioning to, though they're very much sitting inside of larger institutions which are relatively hostile to the kind of change they're promoting. So they're these sort of vanguards of change, but they're in a more hostile environment. Maybe I've taken up my 2 minutes and I'll come back to it later. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We will have one more round anyway, so I'm glad to get your point in later as well. So Stina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Namrata, and good afternoon, colleagues, or good morning, depending on where you are sitting. I joined in the morning, and one of the first things that we did was to put our country names in the chat box, and then we all clicked, and I went through the list. I saw, representatives from the global north, from the south, from the east, and then going into the breakout rooms, listening to the discussions. I told myself, look, this is not just a sub-Saharan discussion and position. This is a shared position, and we are all saying the same things in the non-state actor space. So why don't we take that energy to the state actors, and maybe we will see progress, because we really came together. There was convergence of ideas and also an agreement on what we need to do and what we are doing wrong when we did that chat where we were putting our thoughts. So what inspired hope for me? Firstly, it was that shared vision and understanding and journey going forward. We really started on a positive note, and also hearing that today we really put communities at the center of it all. We talked about locally led adaptation initiatives, and sitting in Zimbabwe, that's one of my flagship activities. And I always tell people that when we speak about the effects of climate change, it's not about those men and women in suits that we see during the World Leaders Summit, those who come in armored cars and their motorcades. It's about the men and women and girl and boy in the community who who are bearing the brunt of climate change, something that they do not even understand because information is not filtering to communities to make them understand why we have extreme weather events, why it is important to develop community-led early warning systems. So those are the people that we really should be talking about, even when we are sitting in the negotiating rooms. Because one thing that I have noticed, Namrata, is that when we get into those rooms, we get in with our national heads. It's about defending my space as Zimbabwe, defending our space as Africa Group of Negotiators. And we forget that there are communities down there who we have to report back to, and we have to think about and have that agency to have responses. So they are bearing the brunt. But when we talk about financial resources, when we talk about technological transfer, when we talk about capacity building, are we thinking about them? That is where the disconnect is. The people who are mostly affected are not part of the discussion and are not receiving even the support that they need. We say that 0.2% of the financial resources trickle down to communities. We need to pause and ask, so where is the money going to? Then secondly, I'm glad that we spoke about accountability. I'm a fan of the common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capacities, something that is in the convention but we are forgetting about. So can we push that accountability narrative and ensure that we get accountable actions? And I always say that when we talk about climate financing, it's not about charity. It's about taking responsibility. So as the Africa Group of Negotiators, as the LDCs, as we walk into those rooms, let's not go in as beggars. We're asking for support because Cyclone Idai came and it destroyed schools. And we are asking for accountability and we are asking for responsibility. Take responsibility for your past actions. Then the other thing is that when I was in the breakout session on exploring interagency collaboration for resilience, my colleague Irene really said something that I liked. That even in that local setting, when there is interagency collaboration, issues of power imbalances, they come out. I coordinate an interagency, coalition. And as you're sitting around the table, you can see who is the donor and who is the recipient. Because the recipient will not speak until the donor speaks. Then they speak to just support what the donor is saying. So those power dynamics, those power imbalances, they are also reflected in the negotiating room. And I said, even in the text, when the text, specifically says developed countries must provide financial resources to developing countries, already there is a power in the dynamic that is there. And we need to ensure that we get to a point that that power dynamic, in as much as it is there, it does not affect how we negotiate and how we get outcomes. Then I liked what Bettina said, and I said it before. We do not have the luxury of time. We should see the agency of the matter and put that as we are talking and as we are discussing. Then the other issue we spoke about, it was on adaptation. That's the last one, Namrata. We spoke about adaptation and it really gave me hope because remember the co-presidency said this is a COP of the people and adaptation is at the center. But there's something that I'm missing, colleagues, and I also missed it today. Loss and damage, which is really close to my heart. We really did not delve deep into loss and damage. Remember in I think it was in Dubai, we got 768 million pledges, but only 321 million has been paid up to date. Why are we silent about loss and damage? Because remember, when we are talking about loss and damage, we are saying adaptation has already failed. So what is happening to those losses and to those damages and to those affected communities? I think those are some of the questions that we can pose as we are moving forward towards COP. Thank you.
Thank you, Sustina. Very thankful for your comments and such powerful insights on inclusion of all countries in negotiations, inclusion of communities. And I also like that you took care of our next question, which was on what is missing. Excellent points. I'm sorry to keep you waiting, Dr. Nupara, and also apologize if I'm butchering your name. But over to you for your comments.
Well, thank you very much, Namrata, for the opportunity, and thanks to everyone who is listening. Reflecting on what has already been shared through the visual and what the Honorable Minister mentioned, to me, I think locally led is critical from a design perspective. It's locally led should start from locally designed process. And I think there are mechanisms through which this can be promoted at national level. If you think about the way national adaptation plans are developed, sometimes in some countries, these processes are not taking stock of the importance of local input, local knowledge, and local priorities in the design of those plans. So often you hear a consultant or a group of people that quickly put together the plan, and they do risk assessments. Sometimes those risk assessments are not validated by local knowledge, and this gives priorities that are considered our national adaptation priorities that are not taken stock of local priorities. I think this is a misstep, but I'm hopeful that from what I've heard, there is a deliberate attempt to integrate science policy and society together, and that partnership enables us to really think about rethinking the way we develop our NAPs. I think the updated NAP guidance that has been provided has given some guidance on how this can be done, and I think if countries started to do that, would be really remarkable. Often we think that the knowledge sits at a centralized level. It's a mistake. Through the work that I've done with the World Bank, we had developed what we call Colleen climate action plans in Burundi. And I was really amazed by the level of and the depth of knowledge that the local communities were able to provide during this formulation process of the CCAPs. So that taking that bottom-up approach is what is central and what is needed to make sure that our plans are well designed through a locally influenced process. I think the other thing I want to mention is the importance of ecosystem-based adaptation and nature-based solutions. And these should be also solutions that are locally owned or locally designed. We know that especially in the least developed countries, nature offers enormous benefits to society. It's not just a biodiversity thing. It's not just a carbon credit issue. It's a resilience matter. Livelihoods and lives depend on natural capital. And taking stock of the importance of natural capital and how those can be protected by the communities who live around those resources is very important. So I'm going to stop there for now, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nupara. We are running out of time, and it was excellent that panelists ended up answering both questions together and mentioning what is missing from the conversation and what needs to be taken up in terms of designing locally led solutions to locally defining solutions. Bringing in LDCs and giving them more importance, more power on the table, having most of us not just talk, but also walk some of these discussions that we've been having, and making ourselves accountable as well in terms of where is the money going when we say we are providing adaptation finance. And so last round, but I'm changing the question now. One word from each panelist on what should be the priority at this point. One or maybe two words, but not more. Marcia, let's go with you.
You asked what should be the priority at COP?
Yeah.
Finance for adaptation, for sure. And looking at it in a holistic way, meaning definitely it's very critical. Continue to expand as much as possible public finance. But there is a massive opportunity from what the points that we've just heard to identify opportunities to make NAPs investable, to better leverage subnational finance, philanthropy finance, private sector, asset managers, financiers, MDB, and there is quite a momentum happening on that. I think there is still a barrier of if that will work, how that will work, but we need to be together making it happen because it will be an only opportunity that we have to continue building the development and the resilience that we need across all our systems with a strong opportunity as well to track progress. So for me are those final for adaptation and diversify optimal way, making sure it's not just the flows, but also the accessibility and strengthening how do we track progress and really show benefits to people at the center and of course nature and Nicole.
Thank you, Marcia. Two others. One sentence only, please. Suranjana.
Yeah, mine are actually two things. Putting people's movements at the center rather than constantly delegitimizing them, which is what is going on, and making governments much more accountable to them. And the second is debunking some of this too much of technologizing solutions and yeah, so sort of bringing them back to human beings rather than AI and sort of glorifying AI too much. Thanks.
Thanks. Great point, Christina.
Thank you. I think my colleagues would kill me, so I need to say this. Priority, getting a gender action plan that is inclusive and that is participative of women, girls, and all the other vulnerable populations. And secondly, getting adaptation indicators that are very strong and context specific and also have a strong means of implementation indicators. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Sister. And Dr. Nomfara.
Well, for me, as a NAP negotiator, I'd like to see a strong decision on NAPs that has very strong language on means of implementation, including a share of that means of implementation be provided to locally led processes. So I think once we have this in the decision, operationalizing it makes it easier. So it's been almost 2 years. We do not have a NAP decision on national adaptation plans. So this COP, we cannot end it without a decision on NAPs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your points. And we are going live to a poll so that we can have every one of you who has joined us online to share your views as well. Please join via the Mentimeter link. I am also going to put it in the chat. Can access it directly from here as well. And we would like to hear from you on a couple of things. Okay. So what resonated with you most from the morning sessions? There are 5 options based on what we heard in the morning, and we will get your inputs in. We have either turning ambition into action, decentralization and locally led action, collaboration across agencies, connecting the dots, see how different pieces fit together, and innovative adaptation finance. It seems like we have quite a few on turning ambition into action, decentralization and locally led adaptation. I think that has been the theme in the 4 sessions and even on this plenary discussion, which is to bring the discussion back to people and to innovate on adaptation finance. Okay. Okay, I'm glad decentralization is getting more and more votes. We will move next to another question. You can keep adding. and this is going to be a word cloud, so there's no options, but which gap or missing perspective stood out for you the most? Just input anything that comes to your mind in terms of a word or in terms of a short phrase, sentence. We'd like to understand what is missing from the discussions so that we can bring it up at some of our sessions at COP as well. Okay, we have truly flexible finance. Yes, we call everything, a lot of it is being called as flexible finance, but it's not really flexible. Loss and damage, as Justina, your point is being mentioned, at least you have supporters on that. Intersectionality, gender, indigenous knowledge, its perspective, just transitions, locally led NBS, nature finance. Oh, currently we are missing private sector as well in this conversation. Although there was another discussion early in the morning which mentioned that there's been too much private sector as well. So we have differing opinions from different people. Good to have conversations where we can converge on these points. Great. We will go to the next slide. What should be the top priority for COP? We've heard from our panelists who had great points. If you want to pick on those as well. Community voices into negotiations. A point which was made throughout the day as well, and from our panelists as well. Decision on NAPs from climate action, supporting nature priorities, engaging social movements in co-designing solutions. Finance system reform was also discussed in the first plenary as well. Tripling adaptation finance, driving cross-sector, cross-boundary diplomacy, moving from planning to action. People's movement and too much technologizing is a good point and needs to probably go in terms of having collaborative conversations. Accessible finance, locally led adaptation, and scaling locally led adaptation approaches. Great. Prioritize finance, improve access and delivery to finance. Excellent input, everyone. And we will close. If today is a journey, how would you describe it? And while you're responding, I will also wrap it up. And I want to thank all of our panelists, starting from Dr. Madan, to Marcia, Sustina, and Farah, and Suranjana for sharing your time and insights. A big thank you to Jorge for bringing our ideas to life visually, and to all of you, the participants, for your engagement, your words, and your energy to the end of the session. And before you log off, yeah, please respond to this fun poll. But also remember, we have 4 more sessions coming. And we will also have D&C Days on a session on the 15th of November at the Resilience Hub, hosted by GRB and Atlantic Council. So please join us there for an in-person conversation if you're there. And thank you again for being part of D&C Days, and let's keep the dialogue on.